In the U.S., it's not just the idea that you can only be elected twice, but every first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, every 4 years, you're going to have a presidential election. Every 2 years, you're going to have a congressional election. And basically every year you're going to have state and local elections, although that's going to change around a little bit depending upon the locality of things. So when you put this into context, the term limit is twofold. One, it's the idea of how many terms you can actually serve, but the other thing is the specificness of the term, because if you're in a parliamentary system and the Prime Minister can call when he or she wants elections, it's not ever going to be every first Tuesday after first Monday of any year, unless that's when the Prime Minister calls it, which is kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. What else have y'all got in reference to this chapter? Julia, you had brought up the presidential prime minister in class today. Are you clear about that?
What did I say?
Israel?
Israel?
I don't think it was you, was it?
I don't think it was
Wasn't
me.
you?
But I'm not clear, if you'd like to.
Okay, what was the presidential prime minister since we're here?
In Israel?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Anybody?
Basically what they did was they had the president elected separately, but he was in charge of the legislature. He was governing over
They
the
had the
legislature.
president elected separately?
Well, they had two ballots. One where the president he wasn't elected by the party, but yet he was running over the legislature. But it didn't really work because they're like, hey, why are you over us?
Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
I think it was the voters elect the party, and then the party goes to Parliament, and then the voters also directly elect the Prime Minister.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually what it was. So you flipped him around on that. You were saying president, and that's why I was kind of looking a little bit
Oh,
weird.
I meant prime minister.
Yeah, this is what they did in the presidential prime minister. The sense was that they wanted to create a stronger leader that was going to be more independent from the parliament. Stronger leader, more independent of the parliament. So they actually had two ballots in Israel, and I believe this was for two elections. The first ballot, Andrew, exactly as you said, you would have a regular parliamentary election where you would vote for the party, and then once you voted for the party would select the seats in the legislature. It makes pretty good sense, proportional representation, that's not really any controversy. But instead of, at that point, the parliament picking who the prime minister was going to be, the second ballot did this. So you could go to the polls and you could actually elect your prime minister directly. You could actually go to the polls and directly elect your prime minister. And the gist of this is they called it presidential because your prime minister would still oversee the parliament, but the prime minister would be selected by the voters, which when you think about it is how a president is selected for office. How a president is selected for office. So kind of keep that in mind. Now when you think about this, and I'll throw this out for just a second, because there is going to be some shadows, if you will. Questions are going to come from some of the shadows of these terms. All right, you've got a United States president, you've got a British prime minister, and you've got a French president in a hybrid system. All right, of those, which one, in theory, would you consider to be the most powerful?
Well, it depends upon, like, pluralities or majorities
That's
and
true,
all that.
it does. It depends upon how the voters work on this. So if you were going to go from most powerful to least powerful, which one would be the most powerful? Go ahead, Ben.
I think in the French system with the president who was elected by his party, and the party also controls parliament, and he picks his own prime minister who's the most powerful.
Okay, that's the key thing on this. When the president's party controls the parliament, and then the president doesn't just win, and you didn't mention this, but just to be specific, when the president wins comfortably, popularly, very popular president, this French president will probably be the strongest one. And the key thing that you did say in this is that role of the prime minister. Because the president appoints the prime minister and the prime minister oversees the parliament, that basically means that the president is not just the head of state, but the president is also going to be the head of government. And what other kind of control does that president have over that prime minister? He appoints or she appoints, and the president has the ability to fire, which means the president is going to have a significant voice when he or she has got control of the parliament and the majority
When
parties.
is it when they don't fire them technically, but they give them, like, the person signs a letter of resignation?
Letter of resignation.
Yeah, and they basically,
that's part of it too. So yeah, you're right. They may not technically fire them. They may just actually receive that letter of resignation, but they're already signed and delivered prior to the term beginning. So the president just has to turn in that letter, and it's basically they didn't technically get fired, but they don't have a job. So really, they did. What was number two? If the French president in the proper circumstances is the most powerful, what's number two?
Prime Minister, British Prime Minister with the majority.
Yeah, if you're the British Prime Minister and you control the majority party, then indeed you're going to be the second strongest, because when you think about it, you're going to have obviously control of the executive part of the government, you're going to have party control over the parliament part of the government, and party is bigger over there, and then you're going to have party control to a certain extent as the courts begin to get the appointments as well. Yeah, but the big thing is the legislative part. So French president, British prime minister, what would you say would be third?
American president.
U.S. president with majority.
U.S. president would be third. In what context?
With
When he has
majority in Congress.
Okay, when the president has control of the Congress, the U.S. president is going to be third. Why would you put the U.S. president third behind the French president and behind the British prime minister? Go ahead.
I don't know if it's the official answer, but because there's so many checks and balances in the American system, because the founding fathers feared about an overpowerful executive.
They did. What's the difference? What's the biggest difference, though?
Senate
between-
is directly elected here as opposed to over there. Like
Okay.
they do like by party, so
Okay.
so they have more legitimacy.
All right, well, is it legitimacy? What's the difference? Okay, elections over there are based on party. Elections over here are based on individuals with House and Senate. So when you think about it, the American president will not be as strong as the British prime minister, because the British prime minister party
Yeah.
is such a bigger deal over there. So these individual representatives and senators are going to be free to go their own way sometimes. Makes sense. The other part of this, when you think about it, is since party is so big over there, just because you have a majority doesn't mean you're always going to get what you want here. Likely, but not always. Why is the French president stronger than the American one? There's two reasons. Go ahead.
Because he's not, he could, he's directly elected without.
That's a big one.
Without the electoral college.
That's a huge one right there. The French president is the only system that we've talked about where you can directly elect your executive.
Without any.
Yeah, I mean, you can elect your prime minister, but it's through the party. In the U.S., you can elect your president, but it's through the electoral college. French president is directly elected, so that's a really important thing. What's the other thing, though, that makes the French president stronger in this regard?
If he has a majority, also in the parliament, he can appoint
That prime minister. And that prime minister is basically a legislative office, but it's going to have the executive fingerprints all over it because that person does what the president says. What's the fourth most powerful?
It's the president here in America without a majority of Congress.
Okay, why is the president not too strong but also not too weak at the same time? Go ahead.
Because he has, even though he might not have a majority, he has certain powers that are just his own because of the separation of powers. He is commander-in-chief. He does do more diplomatic work, and so it's that separation. Because in a lot of other systems, legislature and executive are mixed.
That's right. Because the legislature and the executive are not mixed in the United States, the president, even without the Congress, is going to have certain powers that he can lean on that are only his, that nobody else can touch.
Like pardons, international relations.
Commander-in-chief,
He has
the veto power, there are a lot of
States
things.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Kevin. I think I saw
I
your
was
hand.
just going to say, he has the other side of checks and balances against the other two branches.
That's true. The president can veto a law of Congress and could conceivably stop him. The president's going to help appoint the courts. So yeah, it's